Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Team ASLP Guru Vandana, we are deeply appreciative and offer our grateful welcome to one and all for the fourth session of ASLP Guru Vandana webinar series brought to you by SLP Quest and powered by Eco India. Thank you all for joining in. Next up for this week is a singing competition, details to which you can avail from our Facebook page, that is SLP Quest, and our website www.slp.com as well. For the last week's poetry entry, we had 35 entries. This time we are expecting even more. So make a video recording of you singing a song that depicts your thoughts about your teacher and send it right in. All the attendees are requested to kindly switch off their microphones to facilitate a hassle-free and comfortable interaction. You may put up the questions on the chat box, which will be taken up by the moderator and will be addressed by the speakers towards the end of this session. Today's talk will be on the possibilities and challenges in the care of fragile ones. It gives me immense delight to welcome our flag bearer for the day, Ms. Sonal Chitnis. She is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Speech and Language Pathology at Bharati Vidyapeeth, School of Audiology and Speech Language Pathology, Pune. Her areas of interest are aphasiology and cognitive neuroscience, neurorehabilitation, education and humanities in medical and allied health education, as well as patient advocacy. She was awarded with Young Investigator Award at the World Stroke Congress held at Hyderabad in October 2016. She has volunteered and has served as an advisor of the Aphasia and Stroke Association of India and Epilepsy Foundation, India. She has served as a coordinator at the Indian Federation of Neurorehabilitation, SIG Clinical Aphasiology. She has over 20 invited lectures, 32 paper publications and presentations in both national and international forums to her credit. We extend a very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Sonal ma'am, are you there?
I don't think so. Sonal is there. We'll ask her to comment at the end. She has some glitch joining.
Okay. So we'll move. It's an honor to welcome our moderator for today, Dr. Lakshmi Venkatesh. She presently works as an associate professor in Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Studies and Research, Chennai. She has pursued her PhD in Speech and Hearing Sciences from the University of Washington, Seattle in 2007 under the guidance of Dr. Christopher A. Moore. Her areas of research expertise include speech motor control, child speech development and disorders, motor speech disorders, feeding and swallowing disorders in children and adults. She is actively engaged in early intervention programs for children from birth to 3 years through the Karthikeyan Child Development Unit at the hospital. Dr. Lakshmi has served in multiple capacities with the Executive Committee of the Indian Speech and Hearing Association and is a part of several other national associations as well. Also has served as a member governing council for the Dr. SRC Ish Bangalore and Swika Rehabilitation Institute for Handicapped, Sikandrabad. She recently completed a DST-funded prospective longitudinal research study on the preterm children. She is also actively engaged with the neurocommunication disorders and swallowing disorders specialty clinic at Sri Ramachandra Medical Center and Sri Ramachandra Hospital. She has over 15 paper publications to her credit in both national and international journals and has authored several clinical and theoretical books as well as monographs. She has gained various national and international awards for her outstanding work in the field, like Professor Raiz Ahmad Memorial Award for lecture in 2013, awarded by the Acoustical Society of India, and has won many best paper awards in Isha conferences as well. Additionally, she is also someone who loves to travel and is extremely passionate about teaching. We are deeply honored to welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angel. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much, Angel, Preeti, Prasanna, and the entire ASLP Guru Vandana team for giving me this opportunity to moderate today's session. And thank you, Angel, for doing such a wide job with the CV. That was a lot,
Honored, ma'am.
very kind of you. Thank you so much. So I'm very, very happy to be moderating today's session on possibilities and challenges in the care of the fragile ones. And in the absence of our flag bearer now, I'll just give a little overview of the vision behind this topic, which is largely driven by the energy of the ASLP Guru Vandana team. So these topics have been selected and put together by them, and it's a great honor to be part of these sessions. Possibilities and challenges in the care of the fragile ones, right? I think this topic widens our horizons of ASLP practice in our country. SLPs are becoming increasingly part of teams that are involved in care of fragile ones, starting from premature infants in NICU all the way up to elderly population, including those with neurodegenerative disorders. A decade or two ago, if we thought of these areas, we would probably say that this is all happening in the West more, and this is slowly coming into India. But I think more and more in the past decade, we are seeing SLPs being involved of critical teams and working with medical professionals in these domains. And I think the plan for today is to give you an overview of this area, and we will be hearing from two very, very eminent speakers who have done exceptional work in these areas. And I have great pleasure in introducing both of them. I will begin with Gayatri ma'am. Uh, Welcome, Gayatri ma'am. Gayatri ma'am, I will also introduce her in length so that all of you get to know her. Gayatri ma'am is currently the associate professor and the acting head at the Department Audiology and Speech Therapy Department at the TN Medical College, or the Topiwala National Medical College, and the BYL Nair Charitable Hospital in Mumbai. For the youngsters, you should know that the TN Medical College was probably one of the first colleges which started a training program in India along with Aish at the same year. So TN Medical College was one of the first training programs that was associated with the hospital setup or a medical setup. And Gayatri ma'am completed her bachelor's from the TN Medical College and went on to do her master's from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysore in 1985. She has a career spanning nearly for more than 3 decades now, and she has pioneered a lot of work in the area of swallowing as well as neurocommunication disorders in both adults and children alike. And many of the students that have trained under her are now working in these domains all over the country and are doing exceptional work. Gayatri ma'am, we just heard, has completed her PhD recently, and we are waiting to call her Dr. Gayatri soon. Gayatri ma'am hails from Udupi, Konkan region, and that also I just realized from Rajshekar sir now. She enjoys cooking, and I have heard a lot of stories of your students cherishing your cooking and you feeding them. And so I'm jealous. And true to being a Annapurna and a swallowing specialist, I know that Gayatri ma'am was involved with working at the Nair Hospital for the past 3 to 4 months in the COVID pandemic as part of the food committee at the Nair Hospital. And she has been working tirelessly to ensure that food is served and food is available for all the COVID warriors at the hospital. So salutations to you, ma'am, for that, and welcome to today's session.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Yamini now. Dr. Yamini is Dr. Yamini. Can we see you? All right. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Yamini is the additional professor at the Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology at NIMHANS, Bangalore. Dr. Yamini is also alumni of Aish Mysore, completing her PhD in the year 1990, and then a PhD from NIMHANS, Bangalore, for her work on speech characteristics in persons with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Dr. Yamini also has a career spanning nearly 3 decades, and she initially worked at the Dr. S.R. Chandrasekhar Institute of Speech and Hearing, and then from 1998, she has been working at NIMHANS, Bangalore. She has led a DBT project as PI on articulatory kinematics in persons with ALS again, and has been investigator in several other DBT and ICMR projects. Her work, especially with persons with neurogenic degenerative disorders, is well known, especially the work with Madras MND or motor neuron disorder. I understand Dr. Yamini is a music lover and she plays the veena and the keyboard and tries to
Wow.
incorporate music into her work with rehab also. So welcome Dr. Yamini. And it's great to have both of you speak today on this topic on possibilities and challenges in the care of the fragile ones. So Preeti, shall we start?
Hi,
Ma'am,
I just joined.
Sonal has
Okay,
joined.
hi
Yeah.
Sonal.
Hi.
Hello, Sonal.
Hello. Good
Over
evening,
to
all.
you.
I'm
Good
sorry.
evening. Good
Were you
evening.
able to hear me? I was speaking. I thought I was
Am
on
I
unmute.
audible?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's great pleasure to have this tribute, Guru Vandana, to inspiring medical SLPs in the field. And I'm sure this topic, which is a very important topic for any SLP in India who care for the fragile ones, the tiny thoughts, a very great topic chosen by SLP Quest. I'm really privileged to be here and to be a flag bearer. I'm happy to just voice my few concerns and my passion about this fragile ones and the rehabilitation. And I'm very happy to be here to express my gratitude for the organizers and we have eminent Dr. Lakshmi Venkatesh ma'am who is here as a moderator, and we have a great speaker, Dr. Yamini, who is supposed to be like a pioneering person in MND, motor neuron disorder, disease rehabilitation, and Gayatri ma'am. We all know her. She works in Nair Hospital. So pioneering medical SLPs in India. So the important aspects of the fragile ones, the babies, the young babies with a bronchopulmonary dysplasia or a premature babies, NICU babies. It's very difficult to have a tiny baby held in your hand and then you are supervising the feeding, assessing the safe swallowing abilities, upgrading what to do next, and also importantly the elderly one with the stroke patients, dementia patients, the advancing elderly, degenerating population. We see our grandparents, great grandparents. They're very fragile and tiny as they get old. So it's very important that the topic which is chosen today for this topic, importantly, how do we know that how they have come across many patients and then what message they want to give to the SLPs who are into PG and would like to get into the hospital rehabilitation of fragile ones, the professionals who are also working and what they could be doing. So importantly, that the path ahead in India with so many constraints, we have less tertiary hospitals, we have very less trained SLPs who are able to work in acute care, medical care, or OPD patients. The post-COVID era, how do we handle this fragile cares? And I'm sure with the post-COVID era, even the training SLPs is difficult because many of you must have really missed your semester, clinical posting, when to go to fellowship. The traveling is difficult, but there is always a ray of hope. Divine has given you a webinar platforms so people can hear from the mouth of the pioneering SLPs like Yamini ma'am, Lakshmi ma'am, and Gayatri ma'am, importantly, and with the SLP Quest and many other platforms. So I welcome you all to the great session, and I hope that all of you will take home message what we can do ahead to be trained, versatile in terms of understanding that we need to get trained, become more and more careful, efficient in assessing, designing our goals, therapeutic goals with respect to the patient, the family, the constraints, the local aspects in terms of the socio-economic status the patient is, the feeding abilities, first thing, the communicative abilities. So how do we make ourselves to be the better, efficient medical SLP so that we are able to cater the important, huge population of India, the young babies and the elderly. Great population, the fragile one is chosen for this session. So all the best, and I wish all the best to the speakers for enlightening our audience today. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Sonal.
Thank you, Sonal. So Preeti, shall we have the first question? So we will have the
Yes,
first
ma'am.
question to Dr. Gayatri. Gayatri ma'am, the first question is for you. which groups of fragile population do you work with in your practice, and broadly share the nature of your work with them?
Okay. See, the fragile population that we work with begins from the newborn, the neonate, to the toddlers, then the young children with the, with tracheostomy, okay, those who have airway issues. Then it also goes like some children with severe cerebral palsy who also have respiratory issues as well as swallowing issues. And then we also see the upper continuum, like where we see older patients with progressive neurocommunication disorders like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis. ALS we see, but not so many, but more on Parkinson's. And there are patients with dementia also, which are seen in the hospital. So but as we have a memory clinic also, so we see both ends of the continuum. And to share the nature of work is with newborns, it has begun more like I initiated that work in our hospital through my PhD. Initially, a few cases used to come, but I wanted to learn more about how the newborn, how they swallow, what kind of swallowing issues they have. So more of like my PhD is based on development of a assessment protocol for neonates with swallowing issues, as well as an intervention program with them. So that is still in the process as such, and we do see babies as early as 1 year or 8 months with swallowing problems. Then we also, these are seen when we go to the NICU as such, they are not sent to the department. But the other indoor patients or patients with the Parkinson's disease also, they come at an OPD level also. They are seen in our department, and we try to work out a program for basically their communication disorders as well as their swallowing disorders as and when they manifest.
Thank you, ma'am. So, Dr. Yamini, do you want to add something to that? The same question to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I thank all my gurus here, all my friends, and the entire team, SLP Guru Vandana team for this opportunity. Thanks very much. So in terms of the fragile population, yes, across the lifespan, yes, we do see children right from infants, young children, adolescents, as well, adults, and then it is a tertiary care hospital. So from the point of view of the elderly population or adults, we do get various, the dysarthrias, the phasias. These are all due to, stroke, neurodegenerative, neuroinfection, post-traumatic. So from this kind, so of course, across the lifespan. So we do see a lot of these. And the kind nature of work is like, it is a neuropsychiatric center, tertiary care. So we do all the required evaluations and intervention and so forth. Yes. So.
Okay, thank you both. So I think multifaceted work, right from NICU all the way up to elderly and even end of life, which some of these issues will come up in the next questions. And I think nature of work goes all the way from communication, the cognition, speech, language, as well as swallowing, AAC, probably all of that. So I'll go to the next question. And next question to Dr. Yamini first. So Dr. Yamini, how different are these fragile ones when it comes to working from them? And please share your experiences of how you began working with these special groups in the hospital, and has your perspective changed over a period of clinical practice? So how have you learned over these years, or how has your work changed over these years, both for infants as well as adults, if you'd like to address?
So yes, one is there is an increase. You can see that they are very dependent, right? These frail ones, and that is the first thing. So we have to work towards that, and the aim is to make them as independent as possible overall. So you use the strategies, and the second thing is there is a limitation, right, in their participation in the society. So that is another issue. So how can you get them to be part of the society? Society means, it means, even within the family, or it could be the workspace that they are working in, or anywhere, could be travel or whatever. So a lot of these, it's very different. So an overall perspective has to be looked into. And in terms of some experience, I must say this, like initially out of college, one thinks of, okay, I'm going to apply, all of us know that MIT is a very popular strategy with Broca's aphasia. So then, when you come out and when you start actually, practicing, you realize that there are logistical issues. Now, to train the person, they need to come, right, regularly. So otherwise they do not understand the procedure, or the family member needs to come around. So all these matter when we talking of, the change in the perspective that's happening. So you start, focusing on counseling, asking the family member to demonstrate and see that they learn the strategy, and then so that we can go ahead. Some of these have to be done. So there's a lot of change in the perspective as we start, as we keep practicing.
Thank you, ma'am. Gayatri ma'am, would you like to add something? Share your experience and how you went and started work in NICU, and how easy was it, or how did you start? And then
see, actually, it started when one of the pediatricians sent a 8-month-old baby to us who had post-viral encephalitis, and this child was having swallowing issues. So at that point of time, I had not really worked with such a such a young baby with swallowing issues as such. But then I applied the similar principles what I used to do with the older children. I tried to simplify those and use much more care while handling, and just tried to use a little logic and the clinical experience, and tried to apply it. And I found that the baby responded very well to the oromotor intervention that was given. And when a little digital manipulation is given, it began to in the at the submandibular level, all these simple techniques began to show results. And then it furthered my curiosity in terms of wanting to work with even like younger babies, and then into neonate, because that was, I realized that that was one population which I had not really studied in terms of their swallowing issues. So that is when I began to read more about it and decided to follow I realized that the best way to learn is when you involve yourself in a study relating to that. So that's how then I took up that study and went ahead with it.
thank you both of you. I think Yamini ma'am highlighted the role of caregivers, because we are talking of fragile ones, both infants as well as the elderly. They're highly dependent on their caregivers. So a lot of what we will talk about will be with the caregivers, and training the caregivers, and a change in perspective in some way. And I'd just like to mention, everyone could have different ways to begin practice with these special ones. Sometimes it may be a doctor who will refer, doctor who will know that SLPs can actually work with them. Like in our case, we had a neonatologist who just said, why don't you guys come and do something? And at that time, we weren't ready, but then we dived in and we just learned, and here we are doing a lot of neonatal work in the NICU. So everyone could have different stories of beginning, and I think there's a shift that is needed in working with this group, and we will look at the next question, and let's see how things are different. This is to Gayatri ma'am first. So are there guidelines, resource materials, and mentoring that is available for practicing SLPs to acquire knowledge in the care of fragile ones? So I'd like to really share information about, is there knowledge available, and what can be done to strengthen the training for focusing on development of these skill sets in our budding SLPs to work with these special populations. So let's spend some time talking about this.
Okay. See, there are a lot of guidelines and resource material available online. And initially, like just to get, what should I say, for somebody who's not in that domain, I think ASHA gives a lot of their, inputs. Their ASHA, and if you just even ask for, swallowing intervention in neonates, if you just Google it, you will get a lot of information from ASHA, which is very, very simple to understand, simple to read, and it gives you guidelines in terms of how you would do a simple assessment at the crib, or how you would go a little deeper into the oromotor interventions. It gives you a lot of resources also. So that is one very easy way to search for resources also. Another, this is Arvidsson and Brodsky. Their book on pediatric dysphagia is an excellent volume. And Arvidsson has a lot of articles also which talk about oromotor, oromotor interventions. It also talks about, comparing oromotor interventions with non-nutritive sucking, and whether if both are combined, they will lead to better results, or only oromotor intervention, or only non-nutritive sucking, which is done with neonates, what gives better results. So there is a review article related to that. And there are a lot of feeding assessments, which a lot of nursing, the nurses have come in their research. They have come up with a lot of, in terms of good breastfeeding methods, or, kangaroo mother care, and actual feeding intervention as such to be done. There are simple skills like oral feeding skills. That is a very simple test which is there. I have given a list of references, and I'm sure the organizers will share it with the audience. So this oral feeding skills by law in 2011, it simply you just have to assess the feeding time, that, like, say suppose in 5 minutes how many times the child is sucking. You just have to assess a few simple measures, and you are able to test the oral proficiency as well as the endurance of the baby, and both are equally important. Sometimes the child feeds very fast but then is not able to last it for very beyond a few minutes. So as the child shows fatigue, the baby shows fatigue. So endurance is also important, and oral proficiency is also important. So all this is just done by a very simple test, which is just observation of the baby during the feeding for about 5 minutes. So such skills are available. Then there is a NOMAS is a test, which is for neonatal oromotor assessment, and SOMA. So again, skills of oromotor assessment. All these are available. Some are not. Some are not directly available, but you can get access to them through ResearchGate or so. So a lot of guidelines are available. Mentoring, if you say, personally, I did not come across any mentoring as such, which is, kind of directly online, whether somebody is able to help. What I used to do is get in touch with people through people I know, and who are working in ICU, and through, with their help, I used to get my doubts answered. Now coming to the second aspect about what can be done to strengthen the training for focusing on development of skill sets for working with these special populations. I think we need to have a change in our planning of our syllabus or curriculum or some, especially at the PG level. Like, I could just give a suggestion. Like in postgraduate courses for occupational and physiotherapy, they have like what is called as an elective domain. So some of them specialize in musculoskeletal, some of them specialize in pediatric, some of them specialize in neuro, some of them do in chest PT. So it is like they are final year, or I think from second year onwards or so, they go into their elective domain, which makes it a very special aspect as such. So suppose, for us here, we are doing super specialty, but within our domain, like we may have done MSc speech and hearing, and then we pick up our own hobby horse, and then we try to do more research, and that way we acquire specialization. But if we could do something where there could be a paradigm shift, in our planning of a curriculum, and if that way itself, like suppose now we have a specialization in SLP. Similarly, if we could have in SLP also, if we could choose whether we want to do it in pediatrics or adults or neuro or swallowing, or that way if there is an elective possible, then I think we can really strengthen the training. We can have more in-depth work in these domains, and then help out in developing those skill sets in our young budding professionals. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Only I think I'd like to just, before I give the podium to Yamini ma'am, I think it's great that you're thinking of super specializations in our field, but I think we are moving now from the dual degree to the specialization, and I think that's a great move itself. And I think if you look at the MSc SLP program, like programs like ours, Manipal, and if I can name Manipal and Bharati Vidyapeeth, I know we started the Masters SLP and Masters in Audiology program just recently, and I think the first batch is just passed out this year. We know that the syllabus curricula has already changed and has a lot to offer in these special areas, and there are units discussing about teamwork and practice related domains, and I think that's a great step. I think our challenge really is in implementing these curricula, and I think that's where we need the tie-up with a hospital setup. If you are not attached to a medical college, then we really need the tie-ups with medical college. And as Prasanna is pointing out, I think the fellowship programs, especially for those who graduated with the MASLPs and who would like to dive into these specialty areas, fellowships will really help. Short fellowships for 4 months, 6 months, and I think he's leading the way in head and neck cancer. He's got one fellowship. There are others also, several others, but I think these centers could take up fellowships, and especially for those who possibly didn't have the training, could come and strengthen their skills. So kudos to you for I think leading us to super specialization. I think we are headed there very soon, ma'am. So thank you so much. Yamini ma'am, do you want to add something? You've been doing a lot of training, I know, at NIMHANS. I know a lot of interns come to you for training, and I mean, that's something that they always recount from their internship, that their postings at NIMHANS were, one of the best because they've had so much medical exposure there. So do you want to comment on this question as well? Are there guidelines, and what can be done to strengthen the training?
Yeah, so the first thing is guidelines. So if I take up that part, so as a practicing SLP, so once after graduation, one comes out in India, we have an option of we have the Zisha battery that is available for us. So you can decide, what tests you want to apply, or the Isha monographs are there for us. So they give us some guideline as to, how to go about doing. We've also learned in college, but at the same time, we need to apply your kind of trust into a world wherein, you are just one. That's it. So you need to work out your own, protocol to apply and, apply the procedures and etc. So some guidelines are available. Now here I would like to just mention that there are two issues for a practicing SLP. One is, if it is a non-medico legal case, then it's fine. But if it is a medico legal case, then the Gazette of India is there. So that is come out with, some, it has its own, how to calculate the disability for hearing as well as, speech and language disability. So this was out in January 2018. So all of us are following that. So I think the practicing SLP also has to be aware of this. What is the guideline for, assessing disability? So that is one thing. So some of these things we need to add on in our repertoire. And as far as resource material is concerned, yes, today I must say salute Google Guru also along with the others. So that's a big resource for us. So you Google anything and then you get the information. I remember a few years ago, it just came up with, there was some disease condition, which I don't recollect, where less than 100 cases were reported in publication. So then, first of all, it came with that name, and then I didn't know what to do. I had to Google to find out what kind of, would the patient have a they said speech problem. So was it a dysarthria or aphasia, or was there an associated, dysphagia in it? So I had to look into it, or was there any, more, what is called as auditory neuropathy? We don't know what it was, but there were less than 100 cases reported, but I had to check out for some material before I went ahead. So that is one of the ways, we can do. But resource materials, yes, we have to keep on, having it. And mentoring, yes.
We can't hear you, Dr. Yamini. Dr. Yamini? Okay, Angel, do you want to just check with Dr. Yamini?
Yes, yes, I'll
What's
give it.
happening? So
Yes.
I think, yeah, we have resources and guidelines coming from the other countries which are leading the way. But I think now, after a couple of years of practice and several centers really doing this now, it's time to lay the groundwork for India-specific guidelines. I think local solutions are needed for some of our local problems. So, for example, I'll give the example of the Pala Day, or the I think it's called the silver spoon. Yeah, it's called by different names in different areas. So Pala Day feeding is something that is definitely done in our country, right? Cup feeding, Pala Day feeding is something that's done in our country. And I think our NICU work shows that Pala Days really work. And I think it's time for us to start thinking and laying the groundwork for, I think, India specific and our work. So I think
Lakshmi, could I
it's
ask you something?
sure, ma'am.
Since you all are also
Yeah.
doing work related to NICU and we are
Yeah.
also doing, how about collaborating and doing,
Absolutely. Yeah,
coming up with guidelines and an Indian level?
I think that's the need of the hour. And I think even the doctors, I think the neonatologists are really opening up to us, and they have the confidence with us now. So
Yes.
we are beginning an RCT in intervention, and they are beginning to say things like, they're okay, do you want a change in our protocol, feeding protocol? We'll do it. Just show us the evidence and we'll go ahead and try it. So I think it depends on our skills, and if we are able to demonstrate with consistency and years of work, and I think it's possible to have them on board. And I think it's, yeah, bondola feeding. Thank you,
Yeah, we
Mansi.
call
So
it Bondla.
bondola,
Yes.
yeah. So I think there are so many things like this which are India specific, and I think yes, ma'am, I think that's the way to go. And we not only in NICU, I will say even in the end of life palliative care, I think our beliefs, our knowledge systems are different from the Western beliefs of even end of life philosophies, thinking.
Yes.
I think I think it's time to um, go down to India. I think we should all get together, and I think it's time we start doing that. So, uh, Angel, do we have Yamini ma'am yet?
She's yet trying to connect it. I think we should continue with the
Okay,
session.
okay. We'll go ahead and do the next question. Is anyway to Gayatri ma'am. Okay, we'll go to Gayatri ma'am. The fourth question. So I think you've addressed this, ma'am, but would you like to add anything? Are there screening and other protocols, assessment protocols, both for
Yeah.
children, and
Yes.
how do we access it? So I think ma'am mentioned something about the manual monograph also. So Prasanna tells us that it will be uploaded on the website soon. So I think, ma'am, anything else you want to add to this?
Mm,
So yeah, we're waiting for your work to come out. I think that will be an India specific. There you go.
yes.
Your assessment protocol in NICU. So
I'm really hoping to get that out soon.
yeah.
So, so I have like that assessment protocol. When I compared it with one of the existing ones, there was a good amount of validity that was seen. So I'm hopeful of, and again, as Lakshmi rightly said, it is developed for the Indian, with our Indian background, trying to see whatever our constraints are, what are the problems that we are seeing. And it's a very simple, which hardly takes 5 minutes or to 10 minutes to, kind of to demonstrate, to administer. So I hope that should also come out soon. But even available, there are a lot of screening and assessment protocols for evaluating neonates and young babies, toddlers. As I said, I have shared the resources. In this point, especially if you are considering, swallowing as such, then the multilingual aspect does not come. But when we are looking into the speech and language testing of the babies, another domain which I think we need to really look into are the babies who have been, like in Nair, I'm sure other hospitals also have it. There is like a high risk OPD, high risk babies OPD. So, these same NICU graduates, like once they have been discharged from NICU, they are seen either every week or 15 days or, every month, depending on how their need is. And this is something which is there in my mind, that we should track these babies. These are the ones who are more likely to show with communication disorders and some, cognitive communication disorders at a later level. So for those children, definitely we need to have speech and language tests, which are, kind of like where the multilingual aspect does come. And we need whatever test that we are having, like even simple something as simple as the 3D-LAT or so, we needed to administer in that group and check for oromotor functioning as well as which will impact on their speech and swallowing as well as on their language abilities as such. So
Thank you, ma'am. I think I'd just like to add to the point of Palade about the Nifty Cup. There was some recent work that came out of Ramchandra about the Nifty Cup that was tested along with the Palade for children with cleft lip and palate, and that work is just out in the Indian Journal of Pediatrics.
Okay,
So Nifty Cup, Palade, that is the kind of solution I think we're looking for low income, middle income countries, rather than the fancy, I would say, the bottles, the fancy devices that need sterilization. And I think we need to look for local solutions, and they are there. So I also want to thank you, ma'am, for taking this. So it's not just the NICU, the graduates from NICU. So if you remember in the last session we had on early intervention, and Madhuri ma'am said 1 month, audio, 1 month assessment, and Pratibha ma'am said, wish we could count to 1 month, right? Early intervention. But I think with the NICU graduates, we are beginning work as early as 4 months and 5 months, and we understand that these babies are at risk, and we are doing communication assessments, speech language assessments for them, and following them up, as early as 9 months, 10 months, 1 year. And these are the neurodevelopmental clinics that are coming up. And I think with the pediatricians getting into this specialty, it will be a big boost for SLPs. And just to let the youngsters know that this is an upcoming area, and a lot of pediatricians are specializing in the area of neurodevelopmental disorders as a specialty in their profession. And I think it opens up avenues for us to start working with the NICU graduates as early as, few months. And I think there we go. Right? Ma'am said, let's go early for communication disorder, and hopefully that will also really kick off. So thank you, ma'am. So the fragile care going all the way from NICU onwards, and the elderly is ma'am back? Yamini ma'am?
Not yet, ma'am. Some network issue at her place. I think we should just continue.
Okay,
later.
all right. Okay. So, so we've set the stage, I think, in a way, which are the populations we are working with, and what kind of materials are available. So there are materials available. Let not the availability of materials stop us from working with them, and we'll keep going. So the next question. Preeti, the next question. Thanks. So how do, ma'am, so this is for you again, how do SLPs set priorities and accommodate patients? So I think now we've had some talk on the babies. So let's go to the patients with progressive disease conditions like the ALS, MS, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, or dystonia. How do we set goals, priorities, and how do we accommodate them with patients?
See, I'll try to answer this with, sharing our own experience at Nair Hospital. We used to have, there is this group which is progressive Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis and movement disorder society. Okay, so PDMDS. So they do a lot of work related to for people with movement disorders and Parkinson's disease. They have their groups all over Bombay. Okay, and at one point of time, we had one such group functioning at Nair Hospital when the neurologist also had taken a very active interest. And what we used to find was rather than taking them in, one-to-one, one-on-one sessions, because you had to share the same things with so many people. So it made much more sense to have them all in a group with their spouses or with their caregivers. And we used to plan sessions where at one point of time, it was maybe every time the neurologist would have one issue, either medication or sleep, their sleep-wake cycles or their tremors, or one of the issues addressed by the neurologist. And then along with that, it used to be sometimes the rehab, wherein the physiotherapist would talk about respiratory issues and teach them, through demonstrations. We used to take sessions where we used to ask them to do those exercises, with us. And sometimes it was an occupational therapy goal, and sometimes speech therapy, where again swallowing issues as well as their speech and communication disorders, those issues would be, those problems would be tackled, where we would train them into, maybe for Parkinson's disease, we would train them to increase their loudness, how to increase loudness, and we would give them those exercises and teach them those strategies, give them those, how caregivers could help them. Then sometimes it was a psychologist who would talk about counseling. So it was more like where their different problems would be addressed, and they really began to benefit. They began to come out with their problems. And now, even if it is not existing in NIAR per se, but we have those Parkinson's, those PDMDS groups wherein they do call these different specialists at different times and address their problems. So their priorities as such and accommodating, kind of patients with progressive disease conditions, mainly we needed to understand how their, difficulties change with advancement of the disease. And the entire perspective changes. At one point of time, speech maybe, like where the person is just maybe after 5 years into Parkinson's, maybe he has the person feels that speech is not very clear, and that becomes a priority at that time. But that priority completely changes later on. It may be more that he is losing bladder control, so that becomes his, then communication and all becomes a very minor issue for them as compared to the motor other issues, or rigidity becomes very much more. And at that point of time, I think we needed to even look at ASC and train them related to ASC before they really begin to lose their communication as such. So that way your priority will always depend on the advancement of the disease, and caregiver has to be trained. And that is a very, very important aspect when we are dealing with progressive neurological conditions, that the caregiver has to be, we have to understand the problems faced by caregivers also, and how the caregiver need to be trained to look after the patients also in terms of their communication needs, their overall ADLs are affected. So overall, a very, very holistic program has to be set with them, and it is not possible for any A person or B professional to work into it. It just has to be a team approach. So whenever we are working with these, it has to, I know there are some of these questions coming up, but at this point of time, for setting priorities, setting, kind of treatment planning or goal planning for patients with progressive disease conditions, it has to be decided in terms of like where a team would be sitting together if possible. If not, at least a team, working separately, but then at least these, keeping these considerations, and then frequent discussions as and when possible, you have to plan these out.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think you've covered the whole gamut. But Yamini, ma'am, please, good to have you back. Please add your, this is your area also. Please add your thoughts and comments.
Apologies for disappearing and back again. Yes, thanks. Thank you. ASLPs, as Gayatri has elaborated very well. I must again add that yes, we have to take the patient into consideration first. So what is his priority? Then the family member into consideration. We all have a baseline evaluation done. Everything is very concrete. So we have a diagnosis in place. But the question is, what do I choose in management? So in a person with, global aphasia, the family says, no, please, train him to speak. But that cannot be a priority for me. For me, I know based on the diagnosis and the requirement, the family might say that, but based on the condition, I need to tell them to use, communication first, to think of communication first, and then any other thing. So such decisions have to be taken by us. Now, there are instances, I would say, when, during these management strategies, they might say that, they might discuss other issues, finance issues and so forth. So they may say, no, he's very worried about, the bank balance and so forth. So then what do you do? So in such cases, you need to tell them about, just make a passing mention so that the family is a little more comforted, and then they can continue with the management program that you have suggested. Otherwise, it is very difficult. They may not even listen to you sometimes. So these are very, very essential things that are the priorities are there, and we have to accommodate depending upon the condition, right? Depending upon the state, the condition, basically, in what stage they are, initial, or it's moderately affected, severely affected. So severely affected, it is only the proxy who comes or who calls and says, okay, this is the problem, so what do I do? So what is it that on the call that you can tell them, or when the proxy visits you and say, they show you a photograph today on the mobile and say, look, this is the state that he or she is in. This is what the dysphagia condition is. What do I do about this? So we have to, change our thinking and plan accordingly and go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Yamini ma'am. At this stage, can I throw a question? It's impromptu
Yeah.
about PEG placement. So, when does that come in as a priority? Does it come in, especially for degenerative conditions, just to get into swallowing also? So, we're still at the fifth question, Preeti. So, just talk about if you can just address PEG and
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Yamini
Got
ma'am.
you. Okay, fine.
Hmm.
Yeah. So generally, ideally speaking, not more than a month, right? You would like to have a rice tube in place. But then what happens is in patients with ALS, they may have to continue to use the rice tube. So as I said, it is going to be on a case-to-case basis, the decision to use a peg or not to go for a peg. So in ALS, because their respiratory support goes less, the gastroenterologist will say, no way, can I do a peg? So he decides and says no. But a PD patient, possibly even if they are in a moderate phase with some amount of dysphagia, they can still go ahead with it. So it's a case-to-case basis. So, and there are conditions, of course, I'm not talking of a progressive condition, but I'm talking of a very, a condition called as a lateral medullary syndrome, where the condition is more stable, it doesn't progress, but then it's long term. We don't know whether recovery is going to be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, we have no clue. So in such cases, it may be possible to go. So the decision to move to PEG feeding is case-to-case basis, condition basis, and whether the family can support it, because a lot of care has to be taken when a person goes on to PEG from the rice tube feeds.
Absolutely. Just thank you, ma'am. I think so. I think we've highlighted overall patient goals with respect to goals. It's patient-centered care, family-centered care. Patients help you set the priorities. So, and of course, then you put in your discuss with your team and then get together the goals.
Yes.
So, Prasanna has just added about the
Yes.
criteria in case of oncology support. One criteria could be 20% weight loss in a month. Um or prophylaxis, looking at it prophylactically for patients with head and neck cancer. So let's move on to the next question. So thank you both for addressing that. We are getting to the next question, and what are the steps in generalization and maintenance of intervention regime at home? So just talking of family-centered care, and how have you managed it in your practice? So do these goals really get generalized at home for intervention? And this question is to Yamini ma'am first.
Just I'm sorry. Hello.
Yeah, ma'am, go ahead. Yamini, ma'am, go ahead.
Yes. Can I can't see the screen. Just a minute.
What are the steps in generalization and maintenance of the intervention regime at home?
Yes. So when we talk of generalization and maintenance, one thing is, yes, you have the intervention, you have the plan given to them and so forth, but can they carry it out is the first thing. Is the family familiar with it to carry it out, or is the patient himself? Can they carry it out? So otherwise, we need to break it up into feasible steps. So that is the first thing, so that you break all the barriers where they cannot apply the strategies that you have told them to do it. So that becomes the first thing. And you need to provide tips for anything, any of these. A simple thing is like, okay, you give him a glass of, let him take about 1 teaspoon of, water to swallow is one thing. You might say, but then there are many more things in that, right? So you must ensure that they follow all the steps so that this generalization and maintenance is there. The family member, the caretaker, or suppose they are staying, in an old age home or elsewhere, it is important that they follow the principle that we provide. So they need to learn the strategy. And how do we manage this is by, I generally ask them to kind of give me a demo in front when they are here in person. So that helps a lot in making me understand that, yes, they are sure of the procedure to apply at home or elsewhere. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So it's not an easy job, but we have to definitely keep the most important thing is to keep the family on board, and we just have to get innovative in doing that.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So next question, we'll go to the seventh question. Yeah.
Lakshmi, can I answer
Sure.
this
Please go
also?
ahead. Yeah. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Please go ahead.
So, see what basically in babies, no, especially in the NICU as such, it is advisable to keep, the mother right from the session one. It's in fact, the babies are often kept in the mother's lap, and then the SLP is demonstrating any exercises or so. One thing what I also do is, just so that she gets the psychomotor, the feel of it, I hold the mother's hand, and with her fingers, I guide the oromotor intervention so that she learns in the process. She learns the exact pressure to put and how much not, how much pressure to put, how much not to put. You give simple guidelines that, there should not be redness, when you are giving oromotor intervention on the neonate. It should not leave any redness behind after you remove your fingers. So that also shows that you are not, putting excess pressure. So all this, while you are demonstrating, while you are giving, like from every step you are involving the mother, it becomes very easy for us to then back off and then the mother to do it, because when the mother has to feed the baby about 6 to 7 feeds per day, or I mean even more, 6 to 7 in the daytime. So if there are so many feeds that the mother has to give, it is not possible for us to go once in a day, show, do some intervention for 10-15 minutes and come away and expect that the baby is going to improve only with that. So it has to be that the generalization of the intervention and, with the caregiver doing it, has to be implemented from the beginning. Also, in case of maybe a 2-year-old child being brought for feeding issues or so. So what I generally do is, during, ask them that feed the baby as you would feed the baby at home. Ask the mothers to get whatever food stuff that she was giving the a standard meal. I ask them to bring it and demonstrate. That time itself, that, again, what are the do's and don'ts, what you need to make the corrections, and blend them within that baby's feed then and there, so that it is easiest, that the mother is trained in the earlier sessions itself, and it makes it that much more easier for her to maintain the regimen at home. And one, like the steps could be like, you do the demonstration of, suppose it's a strategy for swallowing, or it's a massage, or it's oromotor intervention. You do it, get the mother to do it with you. Then afterwards, you back off, ask the mother to do it in your presence. So after the second, third session, see how the mother is doing PNF, see how the mother is doing oromotor intervention. That tells you whether the mother is doing, whether you can expect her, whether this mother is trained enough to do at home in our absence. And this is how I have been managing in our practice.
Thank you, ma'am. I think for step by step, I think highlighting how we can work with parents. So it's a together work with parents, and definitely mother empowerment in cases of NICU. And sometimes even father. So we are seeing fathers also in NICU now. So yeah, both mother and father now in NICU. So let's go to the next question. Thank you, both of you. Let's go to the next question on team approach. I think this is so embedded in the medical team, and there's family, there's patient, and I think these are one of the populations for whom you just definitely need a strong team. So share your thoughts on team approach, who, when, why, and any tips to our audience on how to consider team approach in your practice with these special groups. So Gayatri ma'am first.
Okay, this I'll again I'll share our experience where we used to have for over 10 years, we had a neurologist coming, from private practice. A neurologist used to come, and we used to have every Friday, like 1 hour, 1.5 hour, where cases used to be discussed, where the neurological aspect, then the physio, occupational, speech, psychologist. Okay, so we all used to discuss problems together of the patient. Maybe it's a child with cerebral palsy, or maybe it's an adult with Parkinson's disease, or it's a stroke patient, post-stroke patient. And it really, we all benefited. Like we always talk about transdisciplinary approach, where a little of the other person's, are the team members, all who are involved in rehabilitation, we needed to know a little of their background also. This was best taught in that kind of a session, where we saw how the neurologist would assess, how he would, he helped us to understand the MRI scans, or he showed us, where actually the lesion is, as seen in the MRI or the CT scans. Help. So not that we are going to interpret it for our patients, but it helped to understand the patient's background, the patient's disease, where the site of lesion is, how it can have an impact on our rehabilitation that way. Then the physiotherapist would be doing, working on reducing the reflexes like ATNR. And then we learned to see that how postures has to be, can be, the mother has to be, make the child sit in what posture. So the mother keeps the child in her lap. So what should be the mother's posture? What should be the child's positioning? So this is best learned by us also, because when the physiotherapy the child finishes the physiotherapy session and comes to us, we again have to make the child go into the same posture where the child is most relaxed, which is best beneficial for for breathing, a good pattern of breathing, both for speech and both as well as for swallowing. So all this used to really help a lot. So a team approach, if we are sitting together and discussing, there's nothing better than that. If it's not possible, then at least we should share our reports of whatever we are doing. We may share our videos with each other. We may call and discuss with the doctors at every step as to, today the child coughed a lot in the session, or today this is what the patient has been doing and I'm not able to get my goals met. So is there any other medical problem that is having apart from this? So those kind of consultations, because sometimes the patients start doing worse, whether it's a child or it's a person with a progressive disorder, they have their setbacks. So if we have, if we are in close sync with the neurologist or the medical team members, really helps us to change our, goals, our strategies, and helps us to work better for the patient.
Thank you, ma'am. So I think you highlighted how closely we have to work with the team, with all members of the team. And I think these are groups where you really want to know what everyone is doing to some extent. So I think it really helps to gain that knowledge, starting from the medical knowledge to some basics of what everyone is doing, especially with the physios or the nurse or other professionals as well. I'll let Yamini ma'am comment on this. Who, when, why about team approach? Do you want to comment on team approach with working with adults with fragile ones?
Yeah, so the team will be decided depending upon the condition, right? So if it is, we're looking at the neuro cases, then I work with the neuro, we have a neuromuscular clinic, or I will be working with the neurological team. Along with them will be the physiotherapist and so forth. The psychiatric social worker also, I must not fail to mention, very important. The other will be like if it is an onco condition, then I would be working with the ENT head and neck surgeons, with the SLPs involved there and so forth. So the team will depend upon where the SLP is working. So that is the main thing. Now, if I have to work with someone with a psychiatric condition, then I would have the geriatric clinic team. So I would be working with them on this. So this way, the team is decided depending upon our condition. So the most important is, first of all, we need to tell them, communicate to them what we do, because a lot of them have no idea. They think that, speech and swallowing is very superficial, language is very superficial. But then, when we communicate with the right technical documentation, when we provide them, we are kind of giving them an idea, this is what we want. So the documentation in the team approach is very important from the SLP side. So that will gain a lot of, it'll give a lot of trust and say, okay, now you want this to happen, fine, let us go. If I want the person to be in an RIP, okay, this is the reason why I want him to be in an RIP. So this is the way. So this team approach has a lot of plus, because there's a lot of communication. For inpatients, what happens is there is no issue, because the file goes round and everybody, has a look, reads up and everything. The issue when there are patients from outside and they don't bring all the documents with them, so then it becomes again another issue. So this way we need to have the right balance, so that, we have to be part of the team, and we have to also formulate a team. So to go ahead with our management strategies. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I think so. Go ahead and make the team. Tell
Right.
people what you do. If the
Yes.
doctors, if they don't know, so this is especially for youngsters wanting to get into this area in your hospital. Go ahead and talk to the neurologist, talk to the neonatologist, the pediatrician. Tell them what you can do. Get your first case referral, 2 cases. Show them what you can do. I mean, you build trust with the doctor, then you build trust with the patient, and they will be your advocates, and your team will expand. Go ahead,
Can I
ma'am. Go
just
ahead.
add? Yeah.
Go ahead.
See, I would like to share it with the young professionals that when you wanted to enter into a or you know want to talk to the doctors, or you want to build a medical team, very crucial that you know your work very well, and you have to read a lot on their domain. See, they can, you know, they for their life they don't have to learn about audiology and speech pathology. But if you want to be a medical SLP or medical ASLP, you really needed to know a lot about the medical domain, so that then when you talk the same language, they start listening to you.
Yeah.
So you make it your background should be very thorough. You read up a lot on whatever cases that you have. Read up the medical conditions, those you know, what are the complications related to it. A little into the medications also, so that you know when they say that, you know, then when you are not ignorant on their domains, and they, you know, then they begin to respect you. This has been my experience, so I would just want to share that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So I think learn together with the team. So young teams are built together. So they will also learn about what we are doing, and we can learn together. And just another thing, I think be open to learning from all team members. Especially Nico, I would say learning from the nurse, I think is amazing.
Yes.
I mean, she knows how to hold the baby much better than us sometimes when we go in early. So be open to learning from all team members, and there you will be there, into it. So let's go
I'm
to the
sorry
next
I didn't
question.
mention the nurse. Very
No.
crucial.
I think,
You
yeah.
just cannot do
Yeah.
anything without the nurse there.
Yeah.
Whether it's a inpatient in the adult team or a NICU baby or wherever.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So with
Lakshmi.
suctioning or anything, I think they will get you on board. So be open to learning. Let's go to the next one. How has been your experience when we transferred intervention goals to caregivers? I think we've kind of discussed this before, but if there's any other
Yes.
point that comes to your mind, but we've discussed this. If anything comes to your mind, please go ahead and add. Yamini ma'am first.
Yes. See, one thing is never assume that, they can do the intervention program. So it's important to break down the goals, put it for them so that, they understand. So never assume, even if he might be a professional who's, he might be another, medical professional, but still I don't think we should, step back in giving the details in the intervention program. So that way, we are ensuring that our strategy is very effective. That's what we want. So we should be doing that. That's just a point that I would like to.
Thank you.
Lakshmi,
Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead, ma'am.
yeah. One thing what I wanted to say is, like in terms of intervention goals to caregivers, we have seen that, mothers become so excellent in working with tracheostomized babies, because they have really been taught very, by the nurses or by the medical teams how to take care, how to do suctioning, when to observe that the child is uncomfortable. Sometimes they pick on the signs even much faster than us, because they are all the time 24/7 with the baby, and they've seen many ups and downs with the baby. Say a baby comes at 2 years old with tracheostomized, say since birth, if the child has been so then the mothers are very good. And sometimes they there is just as I'm talking another point as what Dr. Yamini said, there she's saying about how we as clinicians need to be very careful before giving on to the parents. But sometimes they surprise you, and sometimes we can also learn from them, because they have been managing with the suctioning or tracheostomy,
Yes.
or with the adult also perhaps, but I'm talking more with the reference to a baby. That kind of care, and how to seat the baby, how to give the peg feeds, all those. Of course we do not generally give peg feeds, but just there's a lot of learning that can be done from parents
Yes.
who have come through a lot with this. And
Yes.
they definitely need our help, and they need our support. Sometimes we need to see whether uh, whether they just sometimes need a helping hand to be pushed into the right direction. Sometimes a just gentle push also helps some of the parents, and with others we really have got to be very careful, because there are some of them who really have very little background. Like we have seen babies in one of the cases where one child with spastic quadriplegia, she was about 4 years old, but the mother was feeding her in a supine position with giving her very hard grains, you know, like how pulao biryani ka jaise chawal rehta hai, those kind of grains used to be put in the child's mouth. Now that is a sure short way for aspiration. So sometimes you really need to observe them, go back and train them right from the background. So both cases are there. So you needed to plan as and how the parent is, at what stage the parent or the caregiver is, and then take them forward.
Yes, so I think, thank you both. And I think the question from Shiv Shankar sir is kind of partially addressed. What are the red flags that the family should be aware while intervention is being done by them? So I think we train the families to be aware of some red flags also, and aspiration, and these are some of them. Is there anything else, Yamini ma'am, or uh,
Uh,
any other
yeah,
red flag that you'd like to mention that families
yeah.
should be aware? Yeah.
Yes, they must, be made sensitive to what is not only swallowing but even communication.
Yeah.
So what is the change that they are observing?
Yes.
Initially he was communicating possibly in sentences, now it has come down to word level. So that is a red flag again, the quantity of communication. So these things, I think we have to sensitize the family, the caregivers. If it is, adult dementia patients, wherein, or, if it is, head injury, or possibly there's an added seizure episode in them. So for various reasons, any change in their verbal behavior, I think we need to kind of, tell the family to kind of look for it. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Something that just came to my mind is about hearing. We have not said hearing till now.
Yes.
I think hearing
Yes.
of the caregiver, I have seen that sometimes you give the hearing aid to the caregiver and that could make a sea change. So I think we look at caregivers, it's difficult for them also. And so equally looking at caregivers and helping them. Here they also are vulnerable, they also are elderly, so I think taking care of them as well, just as we do of our patients. So hearing, checking, I think the whole checking, I think something very simple, but I think we are audiologists as well, right? So let's not forget that we are ASLPs first. So let's go to
Yes,
the
and
next question.
no, I just
Go
have
ahead,
one more thing to add.
go ahead, ma'am.
This is an illustration. So here is a patient who came with laryngectomy. Okay, so absolutely there's no voice box, no larynx. And then his wife is hearing impaired. Look at this combination.
Yeah.
They came initially and then I was wondering what to do first. So, so such combinations in families are very common. So it's important for us to see how we can transfer the training sessions that we are talking about. So, okay, do we handle the spouse first and then the patient, or do we handle the patient first and then what do we do with the spouse about? So a lot of these, are very important, intricate issues which we have to look at.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. We are at the 9th question now. What is the scope of
Right.
practice? I think we've kind of handled this already. Scope of what do you see as the future scope of practice for SLP to expand their practice in India? Gayatri ma'am first.
Okay, so say suppose like now in neonatal, like working with neonates, that practice really has to built up for our profession. We have to first of all create an awareness within our own profession, train our own professionals for this. This should be done, I think, with the certificate course. Initially, I think through workshops, and then so at least an initial awareness is there, and then through certificate courses, I think that is how we can expand the practice to involve with specific populations such as these. And even in progressive conditions as such for the elderly population also, I think it's a entire different ball game altogether. And we need to, we can't, whatever our strategies are there, what we work at the OPD level, they are very, very different when we work with these hospices or when we work with these parents, patients when they are at home and they can't when be brought to the hospital setup. I suppose now maybe we have all got into tele-rehab mode much better in the COVID era than we were before. So I think we needed to build our therapy for these patients at their residences also, where they can be taught, like we can have some video sessions and we can guide them that way. So that is one way of our practice also can be built, and our professionals also can be thought about how these different strategies can be worked together. A lot of these, and I think one more important point I want to bring here is the best way to increase this, increase our practice is to get along with these groups which are already working. I think Nightingale is doing wonderful work in Bangalore with the elderly and, with especially with patients with dementia. I think we needed to get involved with the work that we are doing and, kind of then, collaborative work or work along with them or have them on the sessions when we have our workshops, some way like this, so where we can share our knowledge and we can increase our background of knowledge also. So this is something I would like to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. So, practice settings are wide: NICU, inpatient, outpatient, skilled nursing facilities, old age homes, hospice, as you said, palliative care centers. And you very rightly brought the idea of these support groups. I think Parkinson's support group, the ARTC, the Alzheimer's and Related Disorders of India group, which is what Nightingale is doing, ARTC. And there are so many of these support groups, multiple sclerosis support group, MND support groups. And I think that is a great way to expand our practice in a hospital setup. The NICU, Yamini ma'am,
Right.
go ahead, please.
So I think it's important also, see, we are not looking too much at incidence and prevalence. So I think this is something, one we need to get into. Whichever condition, whether it's a head injury or a laryngectomy or a cleft lip palate. So I think it's important to get some association with larger projects, epidemiologists, so that, we can, have, an idea about this incidence and prevalence. We don't really have too much of information from India. I know Dr. Shiv Shankar has worked a lot on this, but at the same time, I think we need to do it from different parts of the country, so that it is much more, we have a lot more information related to this, and we can plan, assessments and interventions accordingly.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yamini. So the scope is out there.
One point.
Please go ahead.
I feel, I have learned a lot in where these conferences, where they are of, combined, multidisciplinary, like say the Indian Federation of Neurorehabilitation, or where I think related to cognition communication also, there are some conferences which bring in neurologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, ASLPs and occupational therapists. I think we needed to participate very actively in those kind of conferences for us to get a more holistic view of the disorders that we are treating.
Absolutely, ma'am. So there's something called the NEO Core for those interested. Neonatal expert talks. It's a jointly run conference between CMC Vellore, JIPMER, Pondicherry, and Sri Ramchandra Hospital in Chennai. And we've done 3 rounds of this already.
Okay.
So
help me to get into this.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's an open conference, ma'am.
Okay.
They welcome SLPs, pediatricians as well as neonatologists. So I think that very well point, ma'am, very well taken. So the scope is all out there for all the youngsters. The demand is there, the need is there, and we just have to step in. So my final question: what are the challenges that we professionals have in expanding? Any challenges and any your final thoughts on way forward? How do we go ahead and expand our practice? I think Yamini ma'am first.
Okay, all right. The challenge continues to remain because we need to, increase our knowledge base. So getting through the information is a very important thing. For instance, I remember, there used to be a referral, kindly evaluate speech in Haller-Walden-Spatz disease. Then later it came in as NBIA. Now what happened? Now I went back. I did Google Guru again. Google Guru was again my this one, and then what happened was I realized that NBIA was a new term for Haller-Walden-Spatz. So this is what happened. So it is a challenge. So it's an ongoing thing that we need to keep updating. We need to keep reading more, discuss more, and so forth. So that is a challenge. And secondly, the misdiagnosis sometimes that can happen. the misinterpretation that can happen, that is also there. And the other thing is we are dealing with the management, we're dealing with policymakers, so they are all the challenges. A lot of challenges we have, and we have made a small road through. A lot of seniors have been there for us, who have always stepped in and shown us the way. I think we have made a small way inward, but we need to expand on this. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Gayatri, ma'am.
First of all, I think at our Indian level, I think the demand and supply of professionals becomes a very, very important challenge for us. Like when we see that, and what we have been talking all along is, kind of with reference to maybe an urban setup, that also in pockets of certain urban domains. It is not even seen in all metropolitan cities, So I think, first of all, I don't know, our usual problem that we have, we train our professionals and then they go abroad. So we need to have maybe many more colleges, or we need to have many more professionals. So I think when we are talking about super specialization, we need first of all the manpower to do the basics also. And then we have to take them to super speciality. So I think our biggest challenge will always remain related to personal development, where our manpower development, where there itself we face a problem. Like now, for example, I have so much of scope to do I'll just give an example of Nair Hospital itself. We have a dental hospital which is close by. So we see maxillofacial anomalies and the treatment related to that. We have a psychiatry department which is doing excellent work in terms of memory clinic and work in dementia. We are now proceeding towards NICU. But for doing all this and, to bring to have consistent follow-up with all these cases and all these different domains, I really do not have that much of manpower. So I wish to do a lot, but I'm unable to do it. And same thing is happening across our country also, where we do not have adequate trained professionals. So that is one of our biggest challenges. And there's also then about the facilities for adequate training. Like now, those colleges which are not attached to hospitals, then for them, NICU, as you earlier had pointed out, that they need to have tie-up with hospitals. Then only we can do all this. So that becomes one other challenge. And all said and done, the facilities remain in metropolitan cities in small domains, which is only for the urban population. What about the rural population? What about if there are preterm babies born in Mumbai? I'm sure there are preterm babies born in rural pockets of Maharashtra also. Who looks at them? Who looks after them? As of now, we don't have any of these. So I think that is something for way forward is increase manpower development, focus on that, focus on, kind of motivating our SLPs to come back to India after they have been trained there and worked there for some time, come back, that would be one other way. To have postgraduate certificate courses, I think that is another way forward. To have fellowships, what we have already discussed, just wrapping it up, that we have if we have certificate courses and fellowship courses, those kind of things where we can update our professionals, bring them onto a domain. One good development, I think Kerala has, I think they are, I forget the name of the college, but they have a master's course only in deglutition. Only in swallowing disorders, they have a 2-year course. So that could be one way of slowly building up, specializations.
Well, thank you to both of you. I think the challenges are there, and I think our seniors and our mentors have done something and set the stage for many of us to start this work in the hospital setup. So
very
they have built the foundations for us to be able to do that in the hospital setup, and so much work has happened in the past decade or so. So I'd like to thank all our mentors, our seniors, our gurus who are there in the audience today. I think this is like a call to the youngsters. There is this amazing scope that is there, and please go ahead and explore. And there is the jobs will come. I think in hospitals jobs are coming, and we'll get there very soon. So there you go. A quick rapid fire now. So thank you to both Gayatri ma'am and Yamini ma'am for agreeing for this. So Gayatri ma'am, are we ready?
Yes.
So first question, if you get an opportunity to switch your career, what occupation would you choose?
I would love to be a nurse. That
Okay.
was my what to say, my dream was always like ever since I read about Florence Nightingale. That was my dream. After 10th standard, I wanted to go into nursing. Then somehow I became a SLP. Now, if I have a chance, I'll go back to
Okay.
that dream.
Okay. Please tell us one instance where you felt a sense of achievement in the field of speech and hearing. I'm sure there are many, but tell us one instance.
I think one moment which comes to my mind is when I got my first patient off the Riles tube. That was a high. I think I walked on air for the next few days.
So describe your journey in speech and hearing in 3 words.
3 words.
Yeah.
You tell a speech pathologist to use only 3 words. Okay. Exciting, challenging, inspiring.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. And if you were a president for a day, what would be the one change that you would bring out?
I think I would ask the professionals to work, to whatever can be done for those with dysphagia, because that is a vegetative problem and still not many people are aware of it. So I think I would en masse want to train a lot of people for dysphagia management.
Advocacy. There we go. And
Advocacy.
thank you so much, ma'am. I'll go to Yamini ma'am next. Yamini ma'am, your one moment of sense of achievement in speech and hearing field.
One moment. I think, when you feel that, a patient did achieve a small target, even if it was very small, for the patient, it was nothing. But for me, yes, it was a great sense of achievement. Yes. So
Thank you, ma'am.
that's
First person who comes to your mind when you hear the word teacher.
teacher. Yes. I must say, Dr. Shiv Shankar.
Student.
Student. Student. Preeti.
There you go. If you were president for a day, what is the first thing you would think of?
SLB would be on board.
Okay. And tell us one dish that you cook to perfection.
Something like Kesri Bhat.
Okay. And 2 things that have landed up in your bucket list, that are on in your bucket list now.
Continue. That have landed. Okay. So,
Or on your bucket list.
maybe, more into advocacy and so forth, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you both, Gayatri ma'am and Yamini ma'am. So
And
Preeti and team, do we
I
take the
just,
question? Yeah, go
Lakshmi, I
ahead.
just want to thank everyone for,
No, we're not
thinking.
done yet, ma'am. We're not
Okay,
done.
okay, okay.
We'll give,
Okay.
we have the whole lot of, Preeti and team, do we
Okay.
take the questions? What do you
Yes,
say?
ma'am. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so I'm so sorry. I was not meaning to ignore the chat box, but it was becoming hard for me to watch it on the screen. So a lot of questions on the chat box already. Uh, so a lot of appreciation, and I will just take some of them. Anything? So community level training and camps, what are your thoughts? Gayatri ma'am, do you want to take that?
Yes, I think camps are, and this is where I should thank All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, because in my master's, I think we must have gone for about at least 4 or 5 camps in the duration, especially in the first year of master's. And the learning that happened, I think, just opened my, kind of my mind in terms of how much work can be done at the grassroots levels. And from that point onwards, I really have, a very special this about camps. And I know that there is a lot of, things which can go wrong also. You can't really do everything in one or 2 days. All that I know, but at the same time, I think we still require a whole lot of camps to be arranged. And I'm very happy that at Mumbai, like my students are involved in with Dr. Nirmal Surya when he goes for his epilepsy camps as such. Our students are involved there, as well as when Dr. Anaita Hegde goes for camps 3 times a year in the same place she organizes, so that the same patients can come back once in 3 months. So there's a whole lot of work that is being happening, and which can be done. So I'm all for camps.
Gayatri ma'am, one more question. Just how do you handle when there is a conflict between the grandmother and the SLP, or when the doctor says go ahead and do therapy, but you think the baby is not yet ready or something like that? How do you handle these conflicts?
Okay, I think conflict with the grandmother is again a very, very crucial aspect. And sometimes what happens is it is not so much between the SLP and the grandmother, it is more between the mother and the grandmother. Because whatever we teach, the mother wants to implement at home, and there she faces the resistance from the mother-in-law. So I think what we do is call the grandmother also in our sessions. I have done that in some situations where the grandmother has been willing to come, and then shown her, actually that what can happen if you do this, and what can go wrong if we persist with this, if why these postures are important, why these pacing of the food is important, why only small amount of food needs to be given, or one particular type of food needs to be given, why something can't be given. And I think that is like helps to sort out the conflict as such. But it can't be just like, we can't be given less importance at all, because finally the child is going to be in that atmosphere, and if there are senior caregivers who are unable to understand the importance of it, then our therapy really faces a dead end. So we need to work into that. And where it comes with working with the medical team, it becomes a little delicate. You have to watch you have to watch your words very carefully, especially when you wanted to disagree with the medical opinion and you wanted to persist in that. I think you need a whole lot of tact and diplomacy. But I think we have come to a level, maybe 10 years back, when I remember I used to see a lot of cynicism and a lot of skepticism when a speech therapist used to walk into the wards. But now the situation is very, very different. And our youngsters now, I don't think they will face as much resistance as we had to. But now they know that we have already got a place in the team, and they, respect our opinion. So there are times where I have kind of like when a doctor wanted to think of a peg, and I have said that, no, give me a few more days and I'll work it through, and I'll, get the patient off the RT also, so we don't have to go for a peg. And they have given me that much time. Or sometimes where a dietitian has told me that, you are too hasty in getting the person off the RT. Still the person was not ready, so you should not have advised that. So both ways, we also need to learn from them, and we need to also be very confident about giving our own judgment also. So I think now the situation is much better, whether there is a lesser of a conflict than what we have earlier undergone, and they do respect our opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. One other question, Yamini ma'am, do you want to take this? What are your views on tele-rehabilitation of the fragile ones? Have you attempted now in the COVID situation trying to reach out to these fragile adults with tele?
Okay. Tele, yes. I think automatically, we have all shifted to telehealth, teleservices, without doubt. And it is definitely beneficial because I have myself seen two of them, one adult as well as a child, improve in terms of their language strategies. One was a head injured 23-year-old. Now she was nonverbal. In the sense, she was even slightly disoriented. And now because of the 3-month, telehealth, online service, she's improved significantly. So her cognitive communication diagnosis is now going to change in terms of the degree. Right. So in terms of the child also developmental delay was, child with just delayed speech and language, no physical developmental delay, and there has been a change. So that way, there are changes. But the question there, it poses a lot of challenge also. Can I evaluate as effectively as I would do, on a one-to-one basis? Okay, so telehealth. So it has its own pluses, definitely, and its minuses. But right now, I think we need to go ahead with telehealth. That is the most important thing, so that we are in touch, whether it's a dysphagia patient or dysphagia patients are very difficult. So again, we need to monitor every aspect in them. So we need to definitely go ahead with telehealth now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I think we're all trying to do tele with
Right.
oncology as well as neurological
Yes.
conditions, and it's
Yes.
working fine, right? So we are learning new methods, new techniques to
Yes.
make it happen. So one more question, Yamini ma'am, do you want to start first with this question? So psychological issues have not been touched in swallowing. Shiv Shankar sir has pointed out that. Thank you so much, sir. I think before also you said about smell, touch. I think thinking of keeping those issues in mind when we work on swallowing in adults. So Yamini ma'am, do you want to address that? I think those are very important issues, especially when it comes to end of life and we are doing pleasure feeding, right?
Right.
The patient is on Ryle's tube or peg, and we are making sure that there is some pleasure feeding at least. So I
Yes.
think thank you, sir, for bringing that
Thank you.
out. Yeah, Yamini ma'am, do you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What I would say, there are two things. We all live to eat and eat to live. So generally, this is the first or the last slide in most of my presentations. So it is very important, the pleasure, the social activity that happens during eating. So that gets deprived, with a lot of them. So one of the things that I advise some of them would be, especially patients with ALS, progressively the rate of eating will not be the same as, that of a normal. So because of, their oropharyngeal status. So I always tell them, go to the function, go ahead, have whatever you can, sit in the group and come back. Okay, sit in the group, eat a bit and come back. You don't have to finish a meal. Come back home, I'm sure you're hungry. Come back and complete a meal. So this adds a lot on. So they agree kind of. So that way you're taking care of their psyche. So that means you're already, they have to be part of it, right? They want to be, part of the whole function, even during the mealtime. It's not just attending a function, it's during the mealtime also. Same thing happens even at home also. So I think we need to address this issue. Otherwise, they can have, depressive episodes. It can lead to depression, definitely, because there is no one to sit and eat with me. So it does happen. And we don't know what takes over what. So as a result, they may develop, aphasia. They may not eat at all. We do not know what happens at that time. So that's a very significant thing.
Yeah.
Can I
Thank you.
add to
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
Dr. Shiv Shankar sir, thank you so much for bringing this very, very important aspect as such. And in patients with dysphagia, communication disorders, as much as in dysphagia, they have a lot of psychological issues. I just want to give an example of a person. He was 35 years old. He had lateral medullary syndrome. And because of that, he was just unable to swallow his own saliva also. And because of that drooling, because of the, Ryle's tube and all, his 4-year-old daughter would not wanted to come close to the father because she saw a very different father now. She could not relate with him, and that made him go into almost like into a depression. He would just not even focus on to therapy. He was just not able to get the feeling that my own child doesn't want to come to me. What is the whole point of life? That kind of a thing. So involving a psychologist, if it goes beyond for our care, involving a psychologist or even a psychiatrist at that point of time to help him deal with that acute phase, I think is a very, very crucial aspect. As much as even for patients who have then Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis at the at the advanced stages, I think there also a lot of psychological help needs to be given to accept the fact that it is going to advance further, and they will be losing out a lot on their faculties, they'll be losing a lot on their functions, and how we still needed to help them to cope with it as positively as possible. And here again, as I said earlier, that group therapy is like a best aspect because they see others also going through the problems. They see others going with more severe problems than theirs, perhaps. And then somehow, some caregivers are more tougher than others. Some of them, kind of are far more positive than others. And that's where it really helps them to learn from each other. They know that they are not alone. And that, I think, is something which even on the other hand, even with children with cerebral palsy, I think their caregivers, there's nobody to look after their psychological health. Once when we had done a study in terms of third-party disability for mothers of children with cerebral palsy, we saw that they had a whole lot of gamut of problems which we had never really addressed. And things like they want to just plan a meal to go. Husband and wife want to go for a meal or a movie. It is so difficult for them to arrange for for somebody to look after their child in their absence. So all these things, I think, play a lot of role. Like they could have a lot of psychological issues, and I think they should be also taught that they also have a life to lead, and it is not, they should not be made to feel guilty if they wish to go for a couple of days away from their home setup, either leaving the child or the adult, whatever, whoever may be the patient. It is okay if caregivers also, they need to take a break sometimes, and I think those are the issues we also needed to stress in our therapy. So I think psychological health of the patients and of the caregivers are of great importance. Thank you, sir.
And can I just add, I think for the therapist also, I think
Yes.
this is not for the, this is an area not necessarily
Yes.
for the frail hearted. So all the bold SLPs there. So I think I'm not our whole area, but this especially can be a little scary in the middle, beginning to walk into that. But there you are. It's a very, very gratifying area. And we can do it and we should do it. So lot of appreciation in the chat box, lot of um, um, good thoughts for both Gayatri ma'am and Yamini ma'am on the chat box. I think I've taken most of the question, so please go through the chat box just so that you can see what everyone's written. um, I'm going to slowly wind up here and hand it over to the ASLP Guru Vandana team. So on behalf of the uh, team, I'd like to really thank both of you, Gayatri ma'am and Yamini ma'am, for such an excellent session and covering such a gamut of questions. You've given us a glimpse of this whole possibility and challenges for the care of fragile ones, and I think this will really expand scope of practice for SLPs. So all the budding SLPs there, go ahead and take it on. This is a very gratifying area of SLP practice, and I hope many of us will dive into it. And there is endless possibility, I think, of that should be recognized. And there are challenges, but we need to be there to fill the need. So thank you, ASLP Vandana team, for thinking of a very novel and an innovative topic. And I must apologize to all hearing friends here, because we didn't touch too much of hearing, but I am sure there is so much aging and related issues in hearing also. But we will pass that on to the ASLP Guru Vandana team. So my personal thanks to Angel, Preeti, Prasanna, and I know there's a big team behind. So thank you all of you for giving me this opportunity. I think I learned a lot. This is definitely an area where you learn every day. Patients are changing day to day, and you are learning also day to day. So I have learned a lot with every patient, and I've learned a lot today also. So thank you to all the teachers, all our seniors who are here today to support this talk. So thank you, everybody. Over to
I just
Angel
wish,
and yeah.
I just wish to thank everyone from the ASLP Guru Vandana team for this excellent initiative that you all have started. And I thank all our teachers, who are there on this Zoom meeting or who are not there. All of them, they taught us, they, introduced this superb, noble profession to us and opened the doors for us. And I think every day is a very, very satisfying day when you work. And I think if just to have a satisfying vocation, I think it is like, makes your life very, very enriching. So thanks to the teachers, thanks to all the young budding professionals who are showing such an interest and putting so many innovative things. And thanks to all my colleagues and friends out there. Thank you so much. I really had a nice time today.
Can I have my comments? I mean, dear participants as well as organizers and
Yes,
resource
sir.
persons. Wonderful session, I would say, a really wonderful session. In
Thank
fact,
you.
tonight it's raining dogs and cats outside here. And similarly, I think we also had rains of experience from both Gayatri and Yamini, which the tips of which you can't find in any books, It's see, you got to really do it. Okay, and then you evolve with certain solutions and strategies, which are, case to case, They are our, I think, biggest teachers. We learn from them. It's a wonderful session, and I think I must compliment all the participants. I mean, especially it's so special because it just happened one day after Varamahalakshmi, Devi. So you find today was the day of Devis, right from the first Devi, who opened up, Preeti Shetty, and then on to Angel, You're a real angel. Angel, I mean real angel by angel. Okay, you were the troubleshooter and the tail twister also. And then I think, you really got people onto the board. And
Thank you, sir.
Lakshmi was the real Lakshmi. All the time, I was just wondering how she could keep her, face smiling for 2 hours. That requires a lot of practice and grit, right? She's an army officer's daughter. No wonder. And of course, Gayatri is a blend of simplicity, knowledge, and humility. Okay, it's wonderful listening to you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yamini is the present gem of Nimhans.
Yes.
Okay, in fact, I think both of you spoke your heart out. It was such a candid expression that, what you went through, what you felt about it, the perspective, which all came out so clear that I think, the youngsters, need to really realize that its experience is a big teacher, great teacher. And, you learn every day, from everybody. And, okay, anybody else have left out Davies? Yeah, I think, it was a wonderful session. And I think Prasanna and the whole team and ECHO deserve a real round of applause. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be a part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, Dr. Prasanna feels very neglected. He feels there's a gender bias in your comments.
Behind every successful woman, there is a man always. Which I always tell my wife, right? Because behind every successful man, woman also, there's a man is there. And Prasanna, hats off to you, Prasanna. I know you are the mover and shaker. Okay, so go ahead with the wonderful task. I think, it's a wonderful, endeavor with by a young person. I think, we need more of you guys over there. May your tribe increase. Okay.
Thank you, sir. I
Thank
think
you so much.
we have our flag bearer who's eager to conclude.
Good evening, everybody. It was a wonderful session, and I'm really so glad to listen to the stalwarts and their points and their suggestions for the youngsters. I think it's really important. We start jumping in the water, we start learning to swim. That's how people get scared to come to the medical SLP, and they have told us that it is not easy. And nothing is easy. So getting the right training, right knowledge, improvising your skills in assessment, getting the team to be introduced. And important is the interdisciplinary teamwork, So we have to come out of our pond or the lake. And I feel that's the ocean of medical SLP field. So we learn, we teach, we share, we care. And that's how they have really told us today. That how they have been through this journey and then they have become better and better, and today the big wigs in the field. So I think all the youngsters or the professionals here have got a good take-home message. With this, I am a youngster with the flag bearer being here. I'm really privileged and I'm very thankful to you all. I hope we come up with many more such knowledge events and we'll do a good job together so that we help our country and give a good services to people. All the best. Thank you so much. SLP Quest, Prasanna, Preeti, and Angel. Thank you so much all. And the great thankful to the moderator and speakers today. Thank you so much from the great comments from Shashankar sir and Rajshekhar sir. I'm sorry, I'm in hospital, stuck here. So a bad network.
Prasanna, are you there? Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
Prasanna. Yeah.
Shivshankar sir wants to add on functional dysphagia. Please go ahead, sir.
Sorry, sir, I missed that. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
I think we have to look into this aspect also. Though it is not a very frequent condition that you will come across in your practice, but there are occasions where you have to really look into this aspect. One of my experience with that is a patient came to us, he was admitted to the hospital and had a problem with swallowing. And the neurologist looked at it and everybody said with all those MRI and things that everything is normal, and the patient was referred to us what's happening in this patient. At that time, we had Dr. Arden Thorum from USA visiting us for 6 months at the hospital. I just looked at this man and found that this person must be having his functional issues, not really any structural issues with him. So I called Arden Thorum and have a look at this guy. Yeah, he said, yes, you are right. And then how do you handle this patient? I said, okay, we will sit and talk to him. Though the patient was from Kannada, so Arden could not follow what we were talking. But however, I asked him, what actually, what is that you like to eat most of the time? He says, masala dosa. I said, do you make masala dosa at home? No, they make dosa at home, but they don't make masala dosa. But do you eat dosa at home? No, sir, I can't eat. I don't eat. Then I said, how are you surviving? Just last so many days that you are not eating and you have just admitted to the hospital very recently. What were you doing and how were you were listening? Sir, there is one place near my house and there's a hotel. I go there and eat. I got the point. Now, so he was eating, but he's coming back and saying that he's not eating. He didn't want to eat what the wife was cooking for him. So there you have to look at it and then see what's the problem with it. So you need to probably look at a lot of counseling factors in these issues. 2 days back, I had another person who called me and said that father is not eating, hospitalized. And then the doctor says there is nothing wrong with him and everything is fine, but he doesn't want to. He's a 75-year-old man now, so probably must have decided not to eat. And I said, how are you giving him? No, sir, that we have to give him a very, what do you call, ganji and things like that. He's not able to eat. They said they don't give any spicy food, but he's not interested. I said, why don't you put asafoetida in that and then give him? At least the smell will make the hunger, and he would be happy to eat it if he gets the smell. So that's why I said taste, smell, vision, and all these things become important. Now I must be eating so well now because he gets that smell and he feels that he's eating something good. So I think these are the factors that we need to look into this when we evaluate the swallowing functions. It was a great learning from both of you, Gayatri and Yamini, and also Lakshmi. You have really made us them to answer certain very important question, touched upon everything. And I think I should do namaskaras to all the people who made us to learn today. They're all gurus for me, and for all the gurus, I bow my head. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for being a wonderful moderator. You really did covered all the aspects. You gave very valid suggestions, made very valid points, and I think you were a wonderful moderator. We were lucky to have you.
Thank you. All thanks to Preeti, Angel, and Prasanna. So over to you guys. All
Thank
your
you so
effort.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You are a wonderful moderator, no doubt on that, ma'am. I think Dr. Nataraja sir is there and Rangasai sir is there. If they have anything to say, we will hear from them and then we will wind up. Rangasai sir and Nataraja sir, do you have anything to say?
This is Rangasai here. Hello.
Yes,
it was an excellent program. I thoroughly enjoyed. I endorse all that what Rajshekhar said about the entire presentation. These are very critical and in the present ongoing time, very relevant. And I certainly compliment all the speakers. And probably, as I see, Prasanna would have added something more with his inputs. Since as part of organizer, he has not come into the picture at all. But I think it has been very exhaustively covered. Excellent job, and to the organizers also my compliments. I think with this, it was very nice. To all the three of you, I must compliment. Of course, to the not only to the moderator but also to the flag bearer as well. So, to all four of you, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I thank Dr. Lakshmi, wonderful moderator, and it was wonderful to hear you. And Dr. Gayatri for all, even I learned. Yes.
As I always do from you.
Thank you. Okay, and Preeti, Prasanna, and Angel, thanks so much for organizing, inviting, and it was a well done program, I must say. I thank Dr. Shiv Shankar, Dr. Rangasai, Dr. Raj Shekhar, Dr. Nataraja, for always mentoring me. Thanks very much, sirs. Thank you all for being there.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Nataraja, sir, you have anything to say? Any comments? I think we have Dr. Pushpavati, ma'am. Ma'am, any comments, ma'am?
Good evening. One of the excellent session. Ma'am, really hats off to both of you. I'm not much into this particular topic. The way that both of you shared your practical experience, I just felt like, I was just reading a chapter. And
Thank you so much.
thanks to Dr. Lakshmi Venkatesh, a good moderator, you never made us that, it's a kind of a in between, we lost the track. No, nothing. It was such a wonderful experience. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wish that, many more youngsters would have joined to listen to this. I think listening to them is almost equivalent to reading 1 or 2 chapters.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Angel?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, everybody. So before we wrap up for the day, last week we had organized a poem competition. As I mentioned earlier, there were total number of 35 entries. All these lovely poems are written and dedicated from the student to their teachers, also from some of our teachers to their teachers as well. Do visit our Facebook page to read them, as each of these poems are true epitomes of immense respect, love, and gratitude. Thank you to all the participants for showing such tremendous enthusiasm. Through your participation, we expect the same and more for the forthcoming competitions. So just a quick reminder about the competition for the next week. Take it as an opportunity to offer your tribute to your beloved teachers through singing. On behalf of our whole team, thank you Gayatri ma'am, Yamini ma'am, for enlightening us with your valuable and thought-provoking insight on the topic. Thank you Lakshmi ma'am for being such an excellent moderator, and thank you Sonal ma'am for flagging off the session. That brings us to the end of today's talk. We have had a great session today from the eminent dignitaries of our field. Looking forward to seeing you all and more of you for the forthcoming webinar titled Medical Mentorship for Allied Healthcare on the 8th of August 2020, 5:30 onwards. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Regards to all.